atheist tier list. So this is going to be more than just their logical substance. Well, the empirical evidence, it's more than just that. It's also going to be about how they present their evidence. Debaters. So we have S tier, above average, mid, and trash. With all that in mind, we're going to start by putting Peter Atkins in the trash tier. Because as he infamously said, there was nothing, there's nothing here now, it's just a very interesting form of nothing. Now, I don't care how much evidence, like, oh, the empirical evidence, the quantum vacuum and the particles. No one cares. You can't win a debate when you present your evidence like that. So, trash tier. Nothing can't be nothing if nothing is not nothing. We all know this. Now, Bart Ehrman, mid. Nothing to write home about. His reason for denying the resurrection, he's not particularly charismatic. That's another reason why he's in the mid tier. His reason for denying the resurrection is because Romans used to always throw their crucifixion victims into mass graves. So why wasn't Jesus put in one? Well, the Romans made a lot of accommodations, and there's bone boxes of Jews who have nails in them, nails in their bones from crucifixion. So clearly, the Romans made accommodations for the Jews, which they always did. I mean, that's a known fact. Next, water break. Cosmic skeptic, above average. Now, his reason for denying Christianity is comical. It's animals suffer. So that's Christianity's biggest problem. It's like, oh, well, it's not about Jesus. It's not about the existence of God. No, no, no. Animals suffer. It's stupid. Animals don't have souls. Doesn't matter. But as far as his debates, I would say he's above average for sure. In terms of how he presents things, and he argues from a very objective point of view. When I first listened to him, I thought he was an agnostic, but apparently he's an atheist, which is interesting. Actually, Bart Ehrman's an agnostic, excuse me. These two are technically not, I think everyone, let me see. Everyone else here are atheists. I don't know about Robert Gray Cabin, but Ehrman and Cosmic Skeptic are agnostics, but they constantly argue from the atheist point of view. Alright, Richard Dawkins. Trash. Oh my god, he put Richard Dawkins in trash. Richard Dawkins is trash at debating. He has the halo of being, he's the top atheist and all the atheists, and oh my god, it's Richard Dawkins, we love him, but no. Not a good debater. Boeing, what's the argument? Boeing 747, logically invalid argument. He's not good at presenting evidence. Unlike the next person, Christopher Hitchens. S tier. Now, it's funny because in terms of substance of argument, Hitchens is probably in the trash tier, or the mid tier. But his rhetoric is so good. For example, against Frank Turek. In terms of logical substance, Turek won the debate, but Hitchens, whose rhetoric completely smacked Turek around. So overall, I would say Hitchens actually won that debate, although he presented less substantive evidence. And I would say that's the story of Hitchens. He's very, very, very strong rhetoric. That's all the debates he won was solely off rhetoric, I would say. This is most evident from his debate with William Lane Craig, where his rhetoric was matched, not in the same manner. And you can also say he toned down his rhetoric. But again, that just shows the lack of substance in his arguments, but very, very good atheist debater. All of this is relative to other atheists, by the way. Next, John R. Shook. Trash. Now, first of all, his rhetoric sucks. He's just a nerd. And second of all, he's a philosopher, and his arguments lack substance. His main argument for naturalism is not a valid argument. It does not follow. It's a non sequitur. And that's really funny to see from a philosopher. When I first listened to his debate, I thought he was a scientist, or, because a lot of these people are scientists, and their arguments aren't that good because they're scientists and not philosophers. They don't know how to structure arguments. But Shook is a philosopher, so he has no excuse to not be structuring arguments properly. Next, Keith M. Parsons. Trash. I've only listened to one debate from him. It was William Lane Craig, and basically the two key points were, one, his main argument against the resurrection was hallucinations. They were hallucinating. They hallucinated everything, which by itself isn't a very good argument, but also, he said, well, what would convince you? He was like, well, if I heard a voice from the sky and, it told me to start believing, I would believe. It's like, well, what if you were hallucinating? It kind of doesn't make much sense. And also, at some point in his speeches, he said, well, I cannot believe it. It's like, well, that kind of undermines your argument. Next, Louis Wolpert. Again, it's funny because it's another science. I don't know what Keith Parsons is, but Wolpert is another scientist that doesn't understand philosophy, so his arguments just don't really sound that good. In fact, he basically admitted God exists in his debate with William Lane Craig, although he didn't explicitly say. He's like, well, I believe it's a computer, the cause of the universe. He agreed, essentially. He's like, well, the cause of the universe doesn't have to be God. It's like, well, what is the cause of the universe? It's like, well, I believe it's a computer. And Craig's like, well, computers need time to function, this, that, and the third. And then Wolpert just basically gave all of the attributes of God to a computer. But as we all understand, you can't just say like, oh, I have a car, but it has wings and it flies across the sky and you could board a bunch of people. It's like, well, no, that's just a plane. That's not a car anymore. Doesn't make sense. Next, Gerd Ludemann. I'm gonna give Ludemann above average. I'm surprised. I thought I was gonna go into this giving him mid, but honestly, I think he would accept the resurrection if he didn't have the presupposition. And I made a video about this a long time ago. If he didn't have the presupposition that, well, because evil exists, God can't exist. As we all know, that's not a valid argument. And aside from that, I think he would accept the resurrection of Jesus. And as far, we quote him as apologists. We quote him. I'm saying like I'm a professional apologist, but I guess I'm technically an apologist. We quote Ludemann a lot. For example, the 1 Corinthians 15 creed thing. Joseph of Arimathea burying Jesus. We quote Ludemann for things like this. Next, Robert Gray Cabin. You know, this is a difficult one. I'm thinking between trash and mid because he accepts a lot of the facts that are true about the resurrection. He's not someone that completely denies everything. Like, well, it's all gospel, it's all crap, no historical value to it, which is just an ignorant view. But his theory is so ad hoc. It's like, well, Jesus had an unknown twin who survived and appeared to the disciples afterwards. Like, bro, what do you mean? What do you, what do you mean a twin? An unknown twin? Yeah, totally. Out of all of his other brothers, because we know about Jesus' other brothers, but no, he had a twin we didn't know about. Wow. Very ad hoc, so I'm going to put him in trash tier. He's kind of in the middle between trash and mid. Next, Sam Harris. So Sam Harris is mid because his rhetoric is okay. It's not as good as Hitchens, but his arguments are terrible. I would say he's Hitchens without the rhetoric. I'll put it like that. Hitchens without the rhetoric. I'll give Sam Harris that. His rhetoric isn't completely awful, but it doesn't have the level that Hitchens has. He's arguing against William Lane Craig. Does God exist? Well, Christianity has caused so many evils. Well, it's not relevant. That's non sequitur. Next, Sean Carroll. Now, Sean Carroll, unfortunately, his debate with William Lane Craig, the debate topic, and this is a pet peeve I have with the debates, the debate topic was irrelevant, unimportant. Has cosmology contributed to God's existence or proving God's existence? I think the answer is an obvious yes, but if the debate topic, whether or not the debate topic is true, it doesn't matter. God can still not exist or exist. And in my case, I only really care about debates where it's like, well, did Jesus rise from the dead? Does God exist? These are debate topics that actually are important and relevant to me. So, with that in mind, even with that in mind, I should say, Sean Carroll's above average because he understands philosophy enough to not make really stupid arguments. And he's also clearly smart. But then again, I can't really judge that debate fairly because I'm not a cosmologist in any regard, so I wish there was a tier in between. He's not as bad as Sam Harris. There's no way. Okay, yeah, above average. Next, Michael Shermer, trash. Sounds like a nerd. Okay, so his rhetoric sucks automatically. Anyone who sounds like a complete nerd is automatically in trash tier because their rhetoric just isn't good at all. Doesn't, and especially if they're arguing from an atheist point of view, because atheist point of view already has a difficulty sustaining their worldview. And he always brings it like, oh, what's Apollonius or whatever the hell that guy's name is? Always brings him up. Only one God further. all of these other popular level atheist arguments that just don't work under scrutiny. Next, Lawrence Krauss, the super nerd, the super nerd himself. You know what? It's hard to judge him. It's hard to judge all these astrophysicists, cosmologists, this, that, and third, because they are speaking from a point of authority that you can't really argue against. It's kind of like if someone who didn't know anything about basketball, it's like, well, what's a pick and roll? You know, pick and roll is like when you, or I'll do this. Everyone who doesn't know about basketball, you know, a pick and roll is when, you know, someone sets a pick and you go around it, and then the person who set the pick, they go back behind the 3-point line. Someone who doesn't know anything about basketball, like, well, I guess that makes sense. And, like, someone who knows basketball is like, well, no, that's a pick and fade. A pick and roll is when they cut into the paint. That doesn't make any sense. It's kind of like one of those things. He could be saying complete crap, but I won't know. So, really, it's hard to judge fairly, once again, but he is a super nerd. I mean, this guy's more of a nerd than Michael. Okay, yeah, if you're more of a nerd than Michael Shermer, then you have to be in trash here. Very bad rhetoric. In terms of substance, again, it's hard to judge, but he's another one of those scientists like, well, nothing is just, you know, it's not actually nothing. It's a quantum vacuum with all the particles. Bro, come on. Anyways, that's the tier list. Reviewing it, I agree with everything I put in here. Hitchens. If Hitchens had the substance of all these other atheists, he would be a serious issue, but he doesn't have it. But he still has the amazing rhetoric. And outside of, you know, religious discussions, I actually like Hitchens a lot. Unlike a lot of these other people. A lot of these other people I would hate to listen to outside of religious discussion. That's the video. That's the tier list.